All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. And kind of our order of our press conference today is after some opening remarks, I'll turn things over to Sheriff Mike Crenshaw of the Oconee County Sheriff's Office. And Sheriff Crenshaw will introduce the Attorney General for the state of South Carolina, Mr. Alan Wilson, who will also have some comments, and then they will be available for your questions. Over here to my left, if you need a copy of the media packet, I know many of you have this already, but if you do need some extra ones or you've just arrived, they will be over here to my left on the desk over here closest to this wall to my left as well. So let me go ahead and turn things over to Oconee County Sheriff Mike Crenshaw, who will also be introducing some other special guests that we have with us today. Sheriff?
Thank you. Good afternoon. We appreciate you coming out with us today as we share with you the culmination of a 2-year investigation here at the Sheriff's Office that branched out into many other agencies and areas. Operation Rocket Fuel. You may ask why was it named Operation Rocket Fuel? Early on in this investigation, our narcotics agents learned that some people involved in this operation was actually referring to methamphetamine as rocket fuel. So that's where this started. So hence the name of this operation being Operation Rocket Fuel. But again, it began approximately 2 years ago in May of 2019. The Sheriff's Office Narcotics Unit began an investigation on multiple individuals that were trafficking large quantities of methamphetamine and heroin, coming in from the Atlanta, Georgia area into Oconee County as well as western North Carolina. After making multiple controlled purchases, obtaining numerous confidential informant statements, and conducting some intense surveillance, the Sheriff's Office Narcotics Unit was able to determine that a criminal enterprise was actually in operation. That led to identifying numerous suspects outside of Oconee County. Last year in 2020, we actually partnered with a number of agencies, some of which are present with us today: the Attorney General's Office through the State Grand Jury, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Sheriff Clark is with us today in the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, who was not able to make it today, the Drug Enforcement Administration, who is here with us, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina, our 10th Circuit Solicitor's Office, who is present with us, Anderson County Sheriff's Office, Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, that'd be Sheriff Montgomery, Chester County and Sheriff Dorsey in South Carolina, Seneca Police Department, Walhalla Police Department, and the Rabun County Sheriff's Office in Georgia. So as you can see, an abundance of agencies were involved in this 2-year investigation. You will be given a packet afterwards that has all of the defendants and the charges that are included. I'm going to briefly give you a summary of what happened and what we can tell you at this point. 3 of the defendants in your packets identified as Keith Allen Ridley, aka Roach, Michael Shane Elliott, along with their source of supply, Charles Graham, aka Cholo, have been identified as the primary sources for trafficking methamphetamine and heroin into South Carolina. Over the course of this operation, Defendant Graham was found to be responsible for facilitating and selling large quantities of methamphetamine and heroin in or near Atlanta, Georgia. The drugs which were purchased were subsequently being brought back into South Carolina by Defendant Ridley for the redistribution of the methamphetamine and the heroin. During the investigation, it was discovered that Graham utilized what our narcotics unit refers to as runners by the names of Brandon Flores, Carlos Coelho, and Hugo Torres to deliver the drugs to Ridley. Once the methamphetamine and heroin was purchased from Graham, Ridley distributed the drugs in large quantities to multiple individuals in Oconee County, South Carolina, as well as some individuals in western North Carolina. In your packet, these individuals are identified as Michael Shane Elliott, Gary Smith, Terrell Logan Compton, Bethany Johnson, Juliana Sims, Janet Tyner, Mamie Jane Black, Dustin Cox, Jeffrey Wood, James Jimmy Bynum, Kayla Rodriguez, Gregory Goodine, Brian Nimmons, Sean Johnson, Karen Tippett, Catherine Powers, Thomas Powers III, Tony Turner, Haley Shook, which is from North Carolina, and Timothy Luker, which is from North Carolina. As this investigation progressed, GBI was conducting spinoffs. This had several tentacles that kept branching out. And GBI was able to make some arrests as well recently. Over the course of the 2 years, they have arrested 9 defendants in the state of Georgia on 55 charges for charges of trafficking methamphetamine and heroin. And this is over 5 different counties in the state of Georgia. In South Carolina, through the state grand jury, 26 defendants have been charged with an array of 81 drug offenses, ranging from distribution of methamphetamine, distribution of heroin, to trafficking both methamphetamine and heroin, along with some weapons charges. This case is being prosecuted by the Attorney General's office, who will share some remarks here shortly. Between South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, a total of 31 drug dealers, we're talking big-time drug dealers, we believe, have been arrested and charged with 136 offenses. The names from South Carolina, along with the individual charges, are included in your packets. One of the individuals, unfortunately, has passed away from a drug overdose since his indictment. Of course, we will not be releasing his photograph in your packet. To give you an idea of what 2 years of this investigation revealed, over 1,500 pounds of methamphetamine was moved during this time. 1,500 pounds of methamphetamine. Agents were able to seize 5 kilos of methamphetamine, along with quantities of heroin and money and drugs and weapons as well. I think estimated street value is like $68 million worth of drugs that this criminal enterprise moved through Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina during this period of time. The folks that you see behind me, that's what makes all this possible. It's us working together, and we're very blessed in South Carolina to have the benefit of the state grand jury. Attorney General Wilson will share with you some benefits that really aided us in this investigation. So at this time, I'll turn it over to him, and then we'll be available for some questions at the conclusion.
Thank you, Sheriff. You did such a good job. I was making a mental checklist in my head and said I can just delete the first 5 paragraphs of my remarks, and I don't want to be duplicative, but I do want to underscore the importance of what happens when you have synergy between federal, state, and local law enforcement working together to protect our citizens. And you're looking up here at men and women who frankly probably don't get as much credit as I think they deserve on a day-to-day basis, and I'm going to talk about them in just a moment. But again, local law enforcement is usually the tip of the spear when it comes to catching, detecting, deterring, and incarcerating people who are basically dumping poison into our state. As we all understand, the drug cartels operating in Mexico and South America, there's a general understanding that they pour across the southern border and they go to major distribution cities all over the country. Atlanta is one of those notable ones that we would all understand to be an area where a lot of drugs are coming across the southern border. Of course, then through various networks, they come into states and localities like South Carolina and like this community. And it's because of the local law enforcement and their attention to this type of activity that this case began. Obviously, the human intelligence that was gathered led to members of my staff, who I will talk about in just a moment, basically starting the process for a wiretap. When you have the state grand jury involved, it brings resources to bear that local law enforcement doesn't have the ability to do. For instance, the local law enforcement, the sheriffs up here, they have to stop at the county line. Obviously, they can talk and coordinate, but separate investigations occur. And when you're going into multiple counties, obviously it makes it difficult to coordinate an investigation. The state grand jury allows for multi-jurisdiction investigations. Basically, in all 46 counties of this state, the state grand jury can string together in one investigation multi-jurisdictional cases. When it goes outside of the state, we have our federal partners that are there to help us fill in that gap. So the multi-jurisdictional aspect of the state grand jury is a tool that no other law enforcement agency can bring except the Attorney General's office when in coordination with the state law enforcement division. Another tool we can bring to bear is the wiretap, the ability to use the wiretap to basically get the information we need from confidential informants to basically find the probable cause with the corroborating evidence to basically follow the evidence where it leads us and to basically blow open these types of cases. The sheriff talked about, and he gave you a lot of stats, but I do want to underscore a couple of those. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what he said because he did a great job in covering this, but 1,500 pounds of meth is what is believed to have basically been distributed throughout South Carolina across the border. Then you consider what was actually seized: 5 kilos of meth, 8 ounces of heroin, along with other types of drug paraphernalia, cash, vehicles, and weapons, etc. So it's a real serious problem. It was because of the work of the men and women at the local level in collaboration and coordination with our federal partners that we were able to stop and deter this. And basically 26 people taken off the street, 81 charges in these 2 indictments over 26 people. That is substantial. I have copies of the indictments down here in my folder, and they're very thick. Again, we're here today to talk about 2 years of an investigation, but about 2 years wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't be here today if it, like I said, if it wasn't for members of my office, which I'm going to get to last. But I do want to thank the State Law Enforcement Division. I understand we have Captain Jason Wells, Lieutenant Tyrell Woodring, and Special Agent Kevin Tyner. Obviously, our relationship with Chief Keel and the State Law Enforcement Division is so important to state law enforcement, and so I want to thank SLED for being here. Obviously, GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Sheriff Crenshaw mentioned them just a moment ago. I want to thank Sheriff Crenshaw and the Oconee Sheriff's Office, Captain Ken Washington, Lieutenant Anna Orr. I like to say the names of the people because they are the unsung heroes, but I want to thank you, Sheriff, and your team. You're over here. I want to thank you and your team for what you have done. Obviously, you have the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Rick Clark, my good friend and his team, Captain Chuck James and Lieutenant Brett Barwick. I want to thank them, and I know there's others whose names will be left off, but I want to thank you, Sheriff, for what you have done. The 10th Circuit Solicitor's Office, Solicitor Wagner, a very good friend of mine, and I'm really special privileged today to get to give a shout out to the Deputy Solicitor, Lindsay Simmons, who's my classmate from law school, and it's always great to see her up here, Lindsay. So thank you for representing the local prosecutor's office. That is so important. Anderson County Sheriff's Office, Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, Chester Sheriff's Office, the Seneca Police Department, Walhalla Police Department, obviously Jackson County and Rabun County Sheriff's Offices over in Georgia and North Carolina, respectively. And of course, our friends at the DEA. I began my career in law enforcement at the DEA as an intelligence analyst, and so I know firsthand from all those years ago how important the DEA's role is in this. And our resident agent in charge, Andy Harbinson, who is standing here over my left shoulder, and I want to thank you for your leadership. And then, of course, the men and women of the Attorney General's office. I'm standing up here talking right now, but they really, if it wasn't for the legal experience and the prosecutive experience they bring to the floor, a lot of these things would fall apart. Creighton Waters is our chief prosecutor in the state grand jury division. There is no one in the state of South Carolina that knows more about grand jury practice than Creighton Waters. Creighton drove up here today. I want to thank Creighton for his team. He is the one that actually procured and got the process started for getting the wiretap that led to a lot of this stuff coming to the light of day. He is going to be assigning David Fernandez, John Conrad, their assistant attorneys general, who will be prosecuting the case under Mr. Waters' supervision. Again, a couple things I want to say. Doesn't matter if you don't step foot in the state of South Carolina. If you are facilitating, directing, engaging in, or collaborating or colluding to have drugs trafficked in this state, we will get you, we will find you. You cannot go beyond the long arm of the law. You're not going to dump poison into South Carolina like we have seen and get away with it. Not with the type of people standing up here with me today on that wall. So again, I want to thank them. And I want to close with this. All of the things that we're talking about today are allegations in the indictment. All of the defendants that the sheriff and I have referenced, they are innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law. So they have the presumption of innocence, and we will afford them that presumption. But this is a cautionary tale to anyone else who is going to be engaging in drug trafficking, which basically poisons our communities, harms our youth, and brings with it violent criminal activity. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to stand for it. So with that, I wanted to say thank you all for being here today to cover the good work of these law enforcement agencies. And I think Sheriff, did you want to go ahead and entertain questions?
Yes, sir.